Easter is over, or at least this year's celebration of Easter is over. Even though we are frequently reminded, we tend to forget that every Sunday should be seen as a little Easter, and that we ought to feel and express the joy, the gratitude, the wonder, the expectation of Easter each and every day of our lives. So then, in that sense, Easter is not over. Indeed, Easter for believers should never be over. And don't the Gospels kind of indicate this, although not necessarily in direct ways? In the Gospels, the accounts do not end after the Easter story is told. By that I mean they do not end with the women at the tomb discovering the results of the resurrection. They go on to tell us what the faithful writers believed happened after the tomb was found to be empty. And while the four accounts differ, they do have in common, among other things, what I want to concentrate on this morning, and which I will get to in just a bit. Matthew, somewhat surprisingly, says the least following his account of the resurrection. He indicates that the women went to tell the disciples what they had found, that they, or perhaps they and the disciples, were confronted by Jesus, who said that he would meet them in Galilee, that Jesus' enemies began to spread false rumors indicating that his body had been stolen and hidden by his followers so that they could not point to the evidence of the resurrection, that Jesus did meet them on a mountain in Galilee, where he issued what is called the Great Commission, directing them to go into the world and share what they had learned. There are two endings to the Gospel of Mark. The shorter ending indicates that Jesus, through his disciples, declared to the world, in Mark's words, the sacred and imperishable proclamation of eternal salvation. The longer ending says that Jesus appeared to Mary Magdalene, then to 2 disciples as they were walking in the country, then to the 11 remaining disciples at dinner, at which time he upbraided them for their lack of faith while giving them instructions to proclaim the good news to the whole world. At this point, the gospel ends with Jesus being taken into heaven and the disciples following his directions. It is in Luke that we find the unique story of Jesus' appearance to 2 Jesus followers as they walked from Jerusalem to Emmaus on Easter, one of them named Cleopas. When Jesus suddenly joined them, they were so deep in grief and engrossed in thought that they did not recognize him. He traveled with them until evening, when, encouraged to share dinner with them, he began to break bread. And perhaps remembering the Last Supper, they realized who he was, and with that, he disappeared. But according to Luke, he later appeared to all the disciples as Cleopas and his friend were relating their experience, at which time Jesus showed them the wounds in his hands and feet and ate a piece of fish with them. After that, he reminded them of the lessons he had taught and the examples he had shown, indicated that they were being sent by God to continue his work, and led them to Bethany, where his ascension took place. Finally, John, the longest of the gospel endings. It is in this one that we hear of Jesus' appearance to Mary Magdalene outside the tomb. Later, Jesus appeared to 10 of the disciples. Thomas was missing. And again, after Thomas's return, to convince him that he, Jesus, had indeed risen from the dead. John says that he did many other signs to encourage and reinforce their belief. Later still, Jesus came to several of them while they were fishing, stood on the beach at a distance so they could not identify him, told them where to throw their nets since they were not having much luck catching many fish, and joined them for breakfast when they came ashore. Then, as indicated in the other Gospels, he instructed them on what they were to do in telling his story and sharing his teachings. In a somewhat long-winded way, I have returned to my main point of the morning, and upon which I will expand. The Easter story does not end with Easter. Regardless of the specifics of our understanding of Jesus' post-death appearances, whether physical or spiritual or both, the message is that those who had and would follow him had assignments. They were to spread his message by word and deed and tell all who would listen what he had meant to them. They were to go out teaching and preaching so that through them and those they influenced, his work to change the world would continue. And they were to live life as fully and abundantly as possible, thereby demonstrating the power of their belief in God and their belief in the power of God. Living abundantly, living fully, living completely, indeed becoming whole people. That is, in my opinion, at least partially what the post-Easter happenings and teachings are all about. The Plains Indians of our Midwest use the symbol of the circle, calling it a medicine wheel, to portray the universe. According to their belief, everything within this circle, this wheel, this universe, somehow knows that it exists in harmony with everything else. Only humans have at times failed to grasp this basic understanding, and the goal of religious living is to achieve such knowledge and translate it into daily spirituality. Part of the teaching of the medicine wheel is that each individual is born with a special gift, depending upon the direction from which one begins. From the north comes wisdom, from the east comes illumination, from the south comes innocence, from the west comes introspection. Our beginning direction determines the way we first perceive things, and it becomes our easiest and most natural style. Personal growth, and especially religious growth, takes place as one revolves around the wheel, acquiring the different gifts coming from each direction. And we are not complete people, fully human, until we learn all four. The medicine wheel is a statement of faith proclaiming that each of us has vast untapped gifts, and that we have the ability during our lives to go around the wheel and grow. As we understand the different medicines, the different directions, as well as the nature of the medicine wheel as a symbol of harmony, we expand in our ability to do something quite remarkable. We learn to overcome our loneliness and inadequacies. Because you see, once we realize the connections, we can reach out to others and touch their natures as part with us of the harmony of life. And as we touch others and thus grow toward completeness, we can also, with less fear, reach out and touch God. In his post-Easter instructions to his disciples, Jesus was doing more than just telling them to share what he taught and what they had learned. He was telling them that life does not end, rather it continues on, perhaps in a different form. And he was telling them that his meaning and message involved the search for and acquisition of full and complete and abundant life. Life, not just existence. And he was telling them that they had gifts which had to be shared so that others could attain full and complete and abundant life, even as they had to receive the special gifts of others for the same purposes. And he was telling them that while his resurrection pointed to eternity, what he had accomplished by living as totally as possible in the here and now, and that they were to do the same. Christians sometimes get so hung up on eternal life that they forget that we are expected by God to do something worthwhile in our lives right now. Jesus did. He didn't spend his life worrying about or preparing for the next life. He was too busy doing what he was doing. Jewish theology is very wise in this matter. They pretty much believe that we continue to live after death in the memories held by others, and they let God take care of the rest. The concept of the medicine wheel pretty much says the same thing. Keep going around until you acquire all you need to be the complete you. And what were Jesus' instructions to his friends and followers? He didn't tell them to spend all their time praying and meditating and wondering where they were going to wind up. He told them to do and to be and to become. According to the Plains Indian, spiritual growth arises out of the complex journey around life's medicine wheel and culminates in the ability to celebrate life so that in fullness our spirits can soar. And when our spirits soar, we somehow reach for and ultimately touch the divine. It was Russian dissident and author Alexander Solzhenitsyn who wrote, "Sometimes I feel quite distinctly that what is inside me is not all of me. There's something else sublime, quite indestructible, some tiny fragment of the universal spirit. Don't you feel that way?" Well, do you? Some tiny fragment of the universal spirit. A spark of the divine. There are some questions we can only answer for ourselves. Questions like, where am I on this medicine wheel? Am I as complete a person as I can be? Or how hard am I trying to become one? Am I in harmony with the universe by being in harmony with its other life forms, including the human? Am I using my gifts to their fullest potential as I spend my life doing? If you ask yourself those questions, what will your answers be? After all, when was the last time you felt your spirit soar? We've been invited by God to share communion at His table. I emphasize again, the table doesn't belong to me or you or the church. It belongs to God, uniquely, symbolically.